Good morning everybody and welcome back to another War Thunder video, and it's finally time to take a look at the T-62M-1. I've no idea what the 1 stands for. I'd imagine it's that there was different variants of this tank at some stage, but the T-62M, the M refers to modernized. Most Russian tanks have this in the name as well, for modern variants of a certain model of tank. The T-10M is another example if we look at War Thunder. T-72s had M versions, the T-80, don't think the T-80 did actually, the T-90 might do, I can't remember. They have used that nomenclature for quite a lot of their vehicles though. Anyways, today we're taking a look at the T-62M in War Thunder, and if I was to sum this tank up in one sentence, I'd say it's a rear guard unit. It's not supposed to be up the front, it's not supposed to be brawling with Abrams tanks and taking hits on the chin. You know, it's not designed to do that. It's supposed to sit at the back with its 10-second reload and snipe at tanks from long range and basically be a fire support unit. And it works very well in this role. I've only played one game in it that I thought was actually successful, which is what I've recorded, but it pretty much proves all of these points. I'm never getting up close and personal, I'm sniping, I'm staying at the back as best I can. Not that I can be at the front anyway, because this thing is not very fast. But in my opinion, that actually works in its benefit and not to its detriment. So let's take a look at the stat sheet. 115mm U5 TS gun, same gun that the T62 uses if I'm not mistaken. Would help if we were on the ground tech tree, thank you game. Yep, same gun. 12.7 NS VT machine gun, which for all intents and purposes is a DSHK heavy machine gun, like what you have on T-54s and other early Soviet tanks. And a 7.62 SG-MT machine gun in the coax. Very nice too. Turret rotation speed of 10.2 degrees per second. It does not rotate very fast. This is 20 degrees slower than most of the other tanks you're going to be fighting against at this tier. 6 degrees of gun depression, which, while not bad for a Soviet tank, is pretty poor in general. 16 degrees of elevation, same sort of story there. Not terrible for a Russian tank, but not great. Most tanks have 20 or more. 10.9 second reload rate on my current crew level, which I believe I actually have maxed out. No, I haven't maxed out the weapon reloading, so it is going to get a bit faster than that, but roughly 10.5, 10.6 seconds. You have a crew of 4, because this thing does not have an autoloader. You have a 42 ton tank, 610 horsepower engine as it currently stands, 55 kilometers an hour top speed. You're looking at maybe 30-40, generally speaking. This thing is faster in reverse, I will point out, than every other Soviet tank at this tier. It's the T-64B and the T-64A reverse at about 4 kilometers per hour. This thing, it's not much faster. I can't give you the exact number because if I'm quite honest I don't know, but it is faster, and being able to get out of a situation is just as important as being able to get into it, if not more important. So let's take a look at the modifications and we'll do the armor last, if my War Thunder would like to cooperate. There we go. So standard shell you get for this tank as stock is the 115mm APFS DS shell, 4.6 kilos. Muzzle velocity of 1620 meters per second, 450 millimeters of penetration at 100 meters, 370 at 2000 on a flat angle. On a 60-degree angle, you're looking at 159 millimeters of pen at 100 and 142 millimeters of pen at 2000. Decent for a shell, especially when you consider it's free. So it's free. You can't really complain about that, to be quite honest. It's a good shell. The top APFS DS round you get is 445mm at 100, 410 at 2000, 171 at 100 and 157 at 2000. This is better, but it's going to cost you money every time you pull the trigger, so you don't want to miss. You have a couple of heat shells. Well, no, you have a heat shell, which is pretty decent actually, 500mm of pen. A HE round, which I wouldn't even bother carrying, to be quite honest. Anything that you can pen with HE, you can also pen with your heavy machine gun, as far as I'm aware. And you get, is this the Cobra? No, it's not the Cobra, it's a different ATGM to what the T-64B gets. 19 kilograms. Semi-automatic guidance system. I don't imagine that actually works in the game. 4 kilometers maximum range. 3 kilograms of explosive. 0.01 millimeters of fuse sensitivity, which is stupid actually. It's really good. 600mm of pen at a flat angle, and going down to just about 300 at a 60-degree angle. So you should be able to pen most things at the front with this. KPZs, MDTs will definitely penetrate. Other Soviet tanks from the front you'll definitely penetrate, including the T-64BV probably. Of course that's just a guess, I can't say for certain, but I would assume so. So that's that. You also get some 81mm grenade launchers mounted on the one side of the turret, much like it is on the T-64B. This is fine. I rather like the grenade launchers. I think they're quite effective, and I imagine you get ESS as well. So let's just take a look at the armour before we get into the gameplay. Okay, so you have frontal plate is 30mm thick, but this is rolled homogeneous armour. Lower plate is 100mm thick. This is one of those tanks where the lower plate is actually stronger than the upper plate, so bear that in mind. You have 100 there, and 30 on top, 130mm of armour there. So you're looking at maybe 250mm of effective thickness at the front plate on this sort of angle. If we can get the camera to, there we go, at this sort of angle, including the armour in the rear. We have these spaced armour packages here. I don't know what the actual Russian name for these are, but it's effectively their own version of ERA. It's like cheek pieces. A lot of the T-55s had these as well. As a matter of fact, I was actually hoping that the T-55 would be the one getting the ERA, but here we are. We end up with this thing instead. Rubber side skirts, to be expected. These are supposed to stop heat and HESH and ATGMs. Whether they actually work or not, I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't assume so, but they look cool anyway. I quite like them. 80mm on the side of the hull. Whoa, the camera just spazzed out there for a moment. 140 there, 165. Other than the ERA plating, the armour on the tank itself is going to be the same as the T-62. 65 there, 80 there. We will have a look at the internal camera in a minute, see what the composite is actually like. 45 on the rear. 65 there, 60 there. Reasonably well armoured tank considering. 30mm on the top of the hull, that's not great. And the top of the turret. Oof, god. Not great, but let's be fair, anything that can shoot at you in this game will penetrate you at this tier. At least that's been my experience. I did take a bounce during the gameplay, which you'll see, but I can't for the life of me figure out what it was. I think it was an Abrams that bounced off me, but I think that was more his luck than anything else. So, here we are. We have composite armour on the upper front plate, which is just bolted to the front of the armour as we saw a minute ago. It's not underneath the armour like it is on modern tanks that were built with composite. It is just slapped on the top. So we have rolled homogeneous armour, there's 30mm of that, a metal polymer block, so this is like a mixture of metal and fibres and stuff, and rolled homogeneous armour behind that. So we're looking at around 220, 250, 240 even millimeters of thickness. Whether the effective thickness is as good, I'm not entirely sure. We also have our composite armour here, 200mm plus cast armour, same there. The thing that makes these effective is not the thickness, it's the shape. You have to imagine, if somebody's shooting at you from the front, if they aim here, chances are they'll penetrate. But if you happen to be moving and they only aim, let's say, here, while your turret is facing this way, they'll bounce. Although most tanks would bounce that anyway, but it's worth noting that this thing is all about the angling, as far as I can tell. The armour itself is not that fantastic, but if you angle it, you can get lucky, especially because the turret is a weird shape anyway. It's like ovalish, so if anything hits this armour at obtuse angles, it's just gonna ding straight off the side of the armour. So I rather like this tank. I can't say that the armour is effective or not. I've only played one game in it, but like I said, that was more than enough for me to figure out that this thing is a rear defense unit. It's not supposed to be up front, it's supposed to snipe from a distance because of how long the reload is and how weak the armour is in comparison. It has no other option than to stay at the back really, because of how slow it is. But that bodes well for you. The enemy tanks are going to be far too busy concentrating on your T-64Bs, your T-64BVs, your T-64As, your T-55s maybe to a lesser extent, they're not going to be focusing on you. So bear that in mind. Anyway, with that, let's get into the gameplay and see how she plays, shall we? So, for today's gameplay section of the review, we are on the Mozdok map. Normally on this map, I go around the left-hand flank, or the western flank if you want to be more specific about it, towards the sea point. Take the sea point, and then basically take cover within the sea point, because there's sort of like a... I want to call it a bunker complex. Yeah, we'll call it a bunker complex just to make things a little bit simpler. I go hold down behind there, my T-64B normally, if I'm driving the Russians, and snipe at tanks going towards B. In this match, however, as I said in the hangar, this thing is a sniper and a rear defense vehicle. It's not a brawler, and it definitely is not supposed to get up close and personal. So what I'm doing is following our tanks that are taking the eastern flank and supporting them as best I can. Of course, I'm not sure how well this is going to go at the moment. The turret armor on this thing, as I showed in the hangar, is in theory quite good, but I'm not entirely sure of the specifics of how well it works. There is a bit later on where I do take a bounce from my turret, I think. Now that I'm watching it back while I'm recording this post-comms, I'll have to have a look and try and see if I can tell for certain. But if I remember correctly, that bounce was from an M1 Abrams. So I do remember Gaijin saying in the dev blog, I think it was in the dev blog, or I seem to remember it being mentioned somewhere, I can't remember specifically where, but somebody saying this thing is able to go head on with the M1 Abrams. It's not. It's really not. It may get lucky, but then even a broken clock tells the time right twice a day, so it's not really saying much. It would be nice if it could, but I've also heard the debate of whether Gaijin were right to add the T-62M into the game. The Russians didn't really need another top tier tank. I mean, as much as this thing is top tier. I mean, you have the T-62, the T-55A, the T-62M, the T-64A, and the T-64B, and the BV if you add the ERA modification to that. So that's what, 5-6 top tier tanks for the Soviet Union. I love my Soviet tanks. Anybody who's been watching my channel for any period of time will be all too familiar with that. And I'm still crying out for the T-72. I really want the T-72. Hell, when I heard that the T-62M was being added, I was questioning why they didn't just add an ERA package to the T-55A and put it up to 9.0 or 9.3. But they haven't. This is what we've got. This is what we've got to put up with. I know it sounds kind of like I'm rigging on this tank a little bit too much. I'm not. I quite like it. I've only played one game in it, and normally I can tell within my first half dozen games whether I like a tank or not. There's a reason that my Leopard 1 still doesn't have its fire prevention equipment. But that's not to do with me not liking the tank, that's more to do with me realising that I'm not good at playing it. As I've said numerous times before, I'm far too aggressive and it gets me killed. And because the Leopard 1 is fast, my far too aggressive attitude to gameplay makes that thing even harder to use successfully for me. I have to restrain myself from pushing when in reality, if I was driving a tank that was slower, like the T-62M, I could just put my foot down, drive straight towards the enemy and hope that things work out. And for my Soviet tanks, they generally do. But at this tier, because I do not have the armour to take hits in the T-62M, I have to drive it more sensibly, so we're back to the Leopard 1 scenario again. I have the gun, definitely, but I don't have the reload, I don't have the turret rotation speed, and I certainly don't have the armour protection. At this stage I also don't have a repair kit or a fire extinguisher, which is something that is obviously supposed to be taken into account here. Changing the subject a little bit, I absolutely love the way this thing looks. I really do. The composite blocks on the front of the turret look fantastic. That laser rangefinder above the gun looks fantastic. At least I think that's what it is. It may actually be a targeting mechanism for the anti-tank guided missiles. Looks fantastic. The roll mat on the back of the turret, the ammo belt boxes behind the smoke grenade launchers, the snorkel, it all looks fantastic. But then this is kind of what we've come to expect with Gaijin's models at this point. All of them. I can't think of any model in the game that looks bad, and this thing certainly does not. So at this stage in the game, we have actually done surprisingly well, considering I've pushed alongside my tanks supporting them. We have now gotten through the C point, no, through the A point, sorry, and are heading towards B, which is currently in our hands, but beyond that lies the C point, which is being captured by the enemy team. The players who have taken C are going to hold C like there is no tomorrow. They're going to go hold down, they're going to dig themselves a nice big trench and sit there and wait for us to come rolling through them, assuming that is we can break their defences and push through. I'm making this sound a lot more dramatic than it really is, but in reality they're not going to move from that position. They're going to hold their line, and I don't blame them. And they did rather well at it too, considering. At this stage, of course, I have absolutely no idea what is in that cap circle. I just know that it's probably rather angry and is most likely looking in this direction. Although saying that, they would have to have their backs to our spawn to be looking in this direction, so I'm hoping with the element of surprise on my side I may be able to take the zone myself. Of course, I have got support, that can't be overestimated. It's worth noting that in any tank like this, there's that bounce I was referring to. It looks as if, interrupting myself, that hit the turret, I think. It was worth noting that from that angle they should have been able to penetrate the front of my turret from there, but they hit the ERA and it didn't do anything. So, or it hit the composite, I should say. It's not ERA, it doesn't explode. So if I've just realised I may have been calling it ERA throughout this entire video up to this stage. The armour on the turret and the armour on the front of the hull that have been added are not explosive reactive armour. They're composite armour. They're not going to explode when hit, which is a good thing. That doesn't make them necessarily as effective at defeating heat and ATGMs, but it does mean that they're not just one-time use. They'll remain there until the tank's knocked out, of course. Anyway, as I was saying, in any tank like this, it's definitely worth noting that with a reload, as long as this thing has, and the lack of armour, you should always stay with your teammates when and where possible. If you can get a squad together, maybe one person running the T-62M, one person in a T-64A or a B, you can be quite effective. Your friend with the 115mm gun and 10-second reload can cover you from long range with the high velocity 1650 meters per second rounds, and the T-64A or B with the better armour can push up and use it to get as close as possible to the enemy and engage them in close range combat. I quite like this. It adds a little bit of versatility to the top tier Russian meta. But then, for that very same reason, I'm still hoping that Gaijin add the Scorpion-like tank to the British top-tier ground forces. I really want to see that tank, and I know that there's somebody who may be watching this video who would very much like to see it as well. Hello you know who you are. So, let's round up, shall we? Let's wrap up. What is my opinion of this tank? I like it so far. I'm going to continue playing it. I'm going to keep it on my lineup. From now on, it will replace my T-55A as a backup. So I'll have my T-64A, my T-64B, and this as a backup in case the other two get knocked out. This probably means it won't get much use, if I'm quite honest. Although if I'm feeling a little bit bored, I might remove the T-64B, like I did for this game, and just play at 9.0. Of course, that means I'll get up-tiered, but there's a possibility of a down tier too, and I may actually see some more 8.0 tanks at this tier that I wouldn't see playing at 9.3 with the T-64BV. So all in all, I quite like this tank. I thoroughly enjoy playing it, and you know, it's not a premium. It's not like you have to buy it. So I highly recommend anybody who's at top tier Russia and wondering what to do with themselves next to research it if you haven't already. Like I said earlier though, I'm still very much looking forward to the T-72. Please Gaijin, I'm begging you. An East German premium T-72 would make my day. I wouldn't need to buy it. I've got almost everything at Soviet top tier. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, and subscribe for more. And I will see you all in the next War Thunder video. Cheers.